Hi guys, I'm ExactChaos and welcome back to another episode of Transport Planner Says. So there's been a few comments on and questions, to be honest, and I'm going to take this episode and discuss two of those. So, and apologies, I'm going to butcher some of the names. So I think Jizzy Loho asked, how do I build a good transport hub, or give an example of a good transport hub? And we'll look into that a little bit. Tim Baston has also asked, how do we do high density planning? Okay, so I will start with the high density planning. These two go pretty much hand in hand, but I will start with the high density planning. Okay, so high density is around your road categories and so on. If you want a city to look natural, it's only certain areas of the city that should really be high density, and then it should kind of go a little bit more lower density out towards the outskirts. Okay, but that doesn't matter, you can do it either way. But the real key with high density planning is your road network. If you want to build a nice big high density area, you need to provide it some access to some good high capacity road networks. Oh, and you might have spotted that I am using the Park Life DLC on this one. As you can see, I've got a few parks going on around the city. How you lay that out, let's look straight from the top over here. That doesn't really matter, and you can see over here I've made use of standard local roads. Okay, so standard local roads is being used for this high density area. So the layout doesn't really matter that much. What is the big piece that you need to be reminded of is the fact that you need access to some big arterial roads. So as you can see over here, there's some proper access points onto some arterials, but also you are close by the highway network, so people can quite easily get in there and also get back out, either through there or just straight onto the service road and back out. So you can see we've got two highways splitting up and providing us good location for some access points over here. If we go and look at other higher density areas, again, as long as you have proper access to arterials, they generally work quite well, and then it kind of trickles down a little bit from there. I'll get onto public transport in a minute. If we then rather go into a lower density type area, then you see you can actually have these sprawling for ages and ages, and I've got a highway in here now, but something like this can go on for a very long time before you really need a highway network. Over here, this kind of thing you can do quite well. So the real thing about high density planning is proper access to roads, and those roads need to be fairly unencumbered by access points. So if I fully built up alongside this road or alongside these roads and there were people accessing everywhere and so on, this will probably get congested. But now it's a fairly smooth. See, also limited intersections, right? Between all of these things, there's very few intersections on the arterials, and I try and make them fairly limited in terms of access anyway. Okay, so that is my 2 cents worth on high density. The next step then is to also make sure that you have public transport, because a lot of people will actually make use of public transport if you go in the higher density areas. So if I look here, yeah, there you go, 128, 137, look at that thing go up. Okay, so that is another critical part. If you don't have proper public transport associated with your high density areas, you will have a clogged up network. If we go over here, if you go over here where we've got a little bit of high density residential, which by the way is not the most intensive traffic generating development, you can see there's a lot of cars coming in here, going out, because we have limited public transport. We don't have any rail section. It's still not problematic, lots, but there's lots of cars parked and hanging around and so on. I try and plan it out a bit better, but generally if there's no public transport, you see more and more queuing forming. Over here, see, these guys, okay, this is probably a good example. These guys over here don't have direct access onto the highway network. So what they need to do is they need to come into this interchange to get onto the highway network. So if you build high density far away from the highway network like this, you will start having interchanges that fail. If it is close, see, not too big a deal. Okay, not too big a deal over here. You do get a bit of queuing, but it's kind of manageable, because look at that public transport usage right there, right there. Okay, so smaller ones like this, low density, not a big problem, all on local roads, very minor access over here onto the highway network, don't need a lot of and they can be far away from the highway network. They can travel, you can feed these guys onto arterials, similar to what I tried to do over here, feed them onto arterials and have this just go on for ages and ages if it's low density. If it's high density, right next to or very close to the highway network, because you will start getting this problem for people coming from high density and trying to get onto the highway network. The same is also true for industrial. If industrial struggles to get to the highway, you will have these queues. As you can see, some industrial trucks in there and people trying to get to the high density areas also. Again, on this side, high density that doesn't necessarily have appropriate access to public transport. Okay, so that is the first stage, and if that is not the appropriate answer, please let me know in the comments. Tell me if you want to know a little bit more, what specifically you want to know about how to plan high density, and I will be happy to add that to, the other thing, maybe one more point on high density, is do give yourself breaks with proper road networks. Okay, they don't all have to be highways, but at least have some spaces between where you put some arterial roads in between. Okay, something like this, where people can get from place to place without necessarily, and don't build on them. Have them spaced. And now with the new Park Life DLC, you can actually make this area a nice little park. Okay, so that is the other thing. So another big mistake that I think some people tend to make is that even though they have a highway, what they would do is this thing would just go on, and they'll make this massive block of high density without necessarily having the appropriate road networks planned. As you can see over here, I've already, so what I want to do is this is going to be my downtown area right here, right? This is going to be my downtown area, and I've already made sure that we've got appropriate arterial networks to provide access. We've got our public transport services to provide access. We've got our spaced out arterial network to provide the access, instead of trying to build this big block and then trying to put in the access afterwards, because that is going to be a problem. Okay, then moving on to the next one, transport hubs. There is no magic bullet when it comes to transport hubs. It is a few things that you need to bear in mind. Always try and integrate transport services. So if we go and look at this high density area, this isn't right there in the middle, because for this particular station, why I like doing this, one of the first times I've done it, by the way, but why I like doing this is now you don't have to have a constant set of rail bridges like this to kind of cross over roads and things like that. If it was in the middle here, half of this area would be divided, struggling to get people from side to side. So I could have done this, okay, over here, and you would have issues with crossings and things like that. Here you don't have those issues because you already have the grade separations. Okay, but what you also have to do is then bear in mind that you need to get the pedestrians to their spots. So what I've done in this instance is, and I don't prescribe to do this everywhere, but what I've done in this instance is actually put an elevated little walkway that runs in the middle of this and provides interim access points. So there it drops down here and there and there and there, and provides access to all of this. So it's a bit of an infrastructure piece, provides access over here and over there. So all of this is quite easy for the pedestrians to walk to the train station, and that is why we're getting such a major demand, right? Look at these people. Okay, the next step is now what you want to do with your transport hub is make sure that that connects onto other transport pieces. So over here I've built my bus station. Okay, and that's an asset. It's not a vanilla piece, but you can build any bus station, or you can just have a number of bus stops on this piece of road over here. That could also work, and there are places where that works, but that could kind of clog up your traffic if you've got traffic issues. Okay, so now, but what you do is now so as you can see here, as long as you connect it, you have lots of flows of people coming to make use of your buses, and that's then a bus service that can run through here, or it can connect further away to a place that doesn't actually have a rail station. Like I've got a route coming from here to the theme park over there, and that's drawing a lot of traffic. But yes, that is effectively a transport hub, and you should scale this alongside your development. So you don't always have to have a transport hub that includes rail and metro and buses and trams and all of that. You kind of selectively do that. Okay, so if you go down here to the zoo, for instance, I've again got my access to my rail station, and it is causing a little bit of traffic over there people trying to use the rail. And here I've got the bus, and this is probably not ideal because it's a bit of a walk to get to the bus station. Okay, so but still, as long as you have inter-accessibility between these modes, and I could easily plop a bit of a metro station over here sometime, and then all of these are connected, right? They don't have to sit right on top of each other, but try and get them close together and make sure that there is always some way for the people to get from the one to the other one. Okay, so here I can actually expand that onto this side, and I'll quickly, as a bit of an example, say we can have another bit of a grid pattern or however pattern we want, and then run this walkway in a little bit and provide access to the buildings. Okay, so if I grab our new park life new little pathway, so I'll run it like this, and I'll run it that way and that way as I want to lay it out in terms of my roads, right? And now, oops, that's not quite. Anyway, it doesn't matter, it doesn't have to be perfect. You can do it any given way you want, and that is exactly what you do. And now you just drop those down, and this will have proper access to it. Okay, but building that throughout your whole city is not quite ideal. I would only really recommend building quite significant pedestrian infrastructure like this in high density areas. Okay, so if I expand more high density in this area, that would be a good idea to do that. You see this in reality in places like Singapore, Hong Kong. I haven't been to Canada, but I believe Canada has some of these underground situations, not necessarily over the top. In Dubai, for instance, with most metro stations, you would have an overground air-conditioned walkway that connects into main developments. So you can't actually build a big development right on top of this, but you can build it beside and make sure your connectivity is good. Okay, now what I want to say is if you want to lay out a public transport hub, okay, this is one way of doing it. The other way of doing it is centralizing it into the center of a big development. And this is not the perfect example, but what I want to show you is that if you run it straight into the middle, and this can be metro, this can be rail, and you then again have your connectivity between various facilities. Again, doesn't have to be a single asset, but if it is a single asset, what I would encourage you to do is radiate from the center and go lower density from there. So at the very least, your first, and this is what I've not done necessarily in this situation, but this very first kind of big square that we have over here should be high density. That is how you really get this to get a lot of footfall, a lot of traffic, if you've got a little bit of high density all around. So what I've done is I've got my high density area right here next to my transport hub, and so that is why I'm getting a lot of footfall. So that is how you would do a transport hub. And again, it doesn't matter what modes you use, whether you've got all the modes or just one or two of the modes or anything like that. What I would do is actually generate it like that. The other thing you could also do, but it's not good practice, is actually put some parking next to your station. So if you put some parking next to your station, that is a good way of getting people that is from... So let's say we had miles and miles of this low density stuff over here. Let's say all of that area was low density stuff. What we could do is we could do a transport hub somewhere close to well, we could do a transport hub somewhere, and we could do a bit of parking around it to get all of these people to drive there and use the train. Okay, that you could also do. But for that to work in this game, you actually need the Traffic Manager President Edition, and you need to go to Options, okay, Traffic Manager President, and then in gameplay you need to actually allow parking AI. Okay, parking AI to enable more realistic parking. Okay, that will then actually get people to travel to your destinations like here, okay, and make use of parking. Okay, see, it's getting quite busy over here if you use that that mod and that AI. So people will actually use the parking that you're providing at areas. So if you do a train station somewhere with a lot of suburbs around it and you put some parking next to it, that is a good way of getting that to work like it would in reality. So I think that is basically it. Also, I would say scale up your transport hubs as you see fit. Over here I've got one rail station, almost the end of the line kind of station. I've got a bit of a bus station over here, and it's not next to high density, but what it is doing, it is serving this entire area over here. So now I've got buses running to all of these areas, because let's face it, a small little area like this or like that doesn't warrant a train station all by itself, and it doesn't warrant a metro station either. So what it does is we have a suburban little rail station there with some bus stations, and the bus does a routing through here, the bus does a routing through here, picks up everybody and feeds them back into here. And you can see we get tons of traffic, tons of pedestrians through here, and they're making use of our bus stations, okay, and our bus lines to feed them into their various areas. So make sure that your distribution is looked at well. So how do you get to your new rail station? Are you just having people to walk there, or are you providing other means of transport to get them there? And that is in essence what a transport hub is all about. Is about feeding lower capacity services into lower density areas, from lower density areas into higher capacity services, getting them into higher density areas. And when you start looking like big areas of this, if I have numerous blocks of this, and again I say blocks, but they can kind of intertwine, but you need to separate with arterials to make sure that your traffic also functions. But if you have big areas like this, if I say expand that area like this, right, then this starts to become a good area for a metro, where you've got so much traffic that you need to start moving metros around. And similarly, if you've got a big high density residential area, then those lines start to become very adamant if you do them directly to there. If we then expanded this residential area over here with all high density, then linking the CBD with a metro kind of setup is probably a good idea. Okay guys, that has been a bit of an explanation as to how transport hubs and high density planning works in reality. If I haven't properly answered your questions, or you have some follow-ups, please leave them down below in the comments. If you've liked my explanations and you do like this kind of segment of me explaining in a little bit more detail how transport systems actually work, then give it a like, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any new stuff. Thank you so much for watching. Bye bye.